Hi and welcome to the Nasty Nelson Pickleball podcast, brought to you by Pickleball News Asia. And before I go any further, if you like what we do, please do remember to like or subscribe to this video. This week, we're going to be looking at DUPR ratings because quite recently, DUPR changed the algorithm they use to rate us all as players. And I know that many people, me included, have been quite frustrated about some of the things that happen with your DUPR ratings now. So as an example, I've actually won tournaments. I don't mind boasting about that kind of thing. And even after I won a tournament, I actually went onto DUPR fully expecting, oh great, my DUPR is going to go up. But actually my DUPR went down. And I've had many people speaking to me about that fact that they're winning games and their DUPR rating is going down, and people are finding it very frustrating and wondering what on earth DUPR are doing and why this is happening. Because it used to be the case that if you won, your DUPR definitely wouldn't go down. It was possible it might stay the same, but it would go up. So what we managed to do is we managed to contact DUPR, and their lead data scientist, a lady called Sarah Carpenter, was kind enough to get on a call with me and answer some of my questions about some of these frustrations and just in general what they're doing with the algorithm, and to try and shed some light on, does it all make sense and do these guys really know what they're doing? I was wondering, is it a bunch of kind of data science nerds that know nothing about pickleball that are kind of coming up with the algorithm or not? And it turns out that Sarah plays a lot of pickleball herself, but she is also a data scientist. So the first question that I got into with Sarah is I just wanted to know a little bit more about what goes into the algorithm. What are the criteria they're using to try and work out how to rate us as players? And I also asked her whether there could be a little bit more transparency about the algorithm, because for me, it's almost like a black box. I play and I have no idea how they're calculating the rating they gave me. So I was interested in what could be done to make it more transparent. And here's what Sarah told us about that.
Yeah, so first, I'll start at kind of like a high level with how does the algorithm work. So what the algorithm is doing, and especially since our most recent update, which I think has gotten a lot of talk with DUPR, is what we're doing is we're looking at everyone's rating, and then we're deciding what we expect to happen. We're deciding an expected score, and then we're going to analyze how close is the expected score to the actual score. And one team is going to do better than expected, most likely. I mean, you can hit the actual score could equal the expected score, but typically one team is going to do better and one team is going to do worse than the expected score. And the team that outperforms that expected score is going to see their rating go up. The team that underperforms is going to see their rating go down. And so what that means is that there are times where the winner could go down and the loser could go up, which I think can be counterintuitive to some people. But the reason that we do that is because what we learned from that match is that the two teams are closer in rating than what we expected. And therefore, whenever we're trying to predict that match in the future, we are going to predict a closer score. So that's the notion of like performance versus expectation and how that works. The other things that go into it are so kind of trying to decide like how much should your rating move. So one thing that I see a lot is this discussion between how my rating is moving versus my partner's. And a lot of times people will get upset whenever they say, okay, we won, but my partner went up more than me. A lot of times they leave out, or maybe take this side of maybe I go down more than my partner, right? But what happens is we're actually not looking at the rating of the players whenever we're deciding that. We're actually looking at the overall like match history of every player to decide how much they're going to move. So a player with a lot more matches in their history and a lot more recent matches, each match is only going to move them incrementally because they're stabilized. We already have a good idea of their level. People who are newer or have taken a break from playing, those people might be a little bit more volatile because every match that we're getting is going to be more relative information about that player. So then the next thing we do also think about, like, who uploaded the match? Was it a player uploaded match or was it a director uploaded match? And then we also consider the age of the match. So a more recent match is going to count more towards your rating. And then lastly, we look at whether it's a 1-game match or a best 2 out of 3. So that's how it all works. The other question you said is it something that you can be more transparent on? So yes, right? Technically, yes. And we are working to be as transparent as we can and in as helpful of a way as possible. So I don't think we ever plan to. I know in like table tennis, there's literally like a grid that says like, if this happens, then this is how many points you get, right? It's like very, very, very simple and very transparent. I don't think we ever plan to be on that level because what we are doing, right? Pickleball is still such a new sport that we are continuing to evolve the formula with the new data that we get and with like the sport changing. And so we continue to test these things every single day and continue to tweak things. So rather than putting on our website, this is the exact number or ratio or way that our algorithm works. We now have introduced the DUPR forecast tool, which will tell you the expected score. So you can go into your app, you can select your partner, you can select opponents, and you can see what DUPR expects the match to go. So then you at least have an idea of, okay, here's what I need to score to outperform. Here's what I need to score that would be underperformance. And then we're actually working on a tool as well to see if the score was XYZ, how would that change my rating? So we're definitely working on transparency tools to try to help players understand. And to be honest, even the fact that we show rating movement after each match, I consider to be a transparency tool. The overall rating is really what matters. And I'll try to emphasize that today as much as possible, that while the whole like ecosystem and algorithm is formed up of all of these individual matches, it's the overall rating of each player that it kind of aggregates to that we care the most about and that we want players to care the most about. So even just showing the individual match movements, right? You're typically going up and down around your rating. Sometimes you're in like seasons of growth where you're going up. That is like a transparency tool to be able to see how each match is affecting your rating.
Okay, so for me, I feel a little bit better now. I at least understand the logic as to why it actually does make sense that even if you win a game, dependent on the level of the team you're playing, you may actually lose points. So before speaking to Sarah, I didn't quite get it. I can't say it makes me feel good, but I do totally understand the logic they're using that can lead to you losing DUPR ratings even when you win a game. So at least you cleared that up. I also felt that on the transparency question, me personally, I think a lot of other people already knew this, but I actually didn't know they had the forecast tool in the app. And for me, again, that's actually really helpful because at least it means now that I know going into a game, I can actually use the forecast tool and understand, particularly if I'm going in against lower ranked players, I can understand how much I'm going to need to beat them by to avoid my DUPR going down, which I find that really useful. And I looked at the app and just played around with it. So I put in, for instance, me and my typical mixed doubles partner, and then just dragged out a dream team of Anna Bright and Gabrielle Tardio. Looked at that and said, if we were playing traditional scoring up to 15, what would the expected score be? So basically, it said that we might win half a point. I don't know how you win half a point, but I think that would mean if we won a point, our DUPR would probably go up quite a lot. So even if we lost 15-1, our DUPR would actually go up and theirs would probably go down. Don't think that game's ever going to happen, but anyway, it's interesting and a useful tool, certainly in my opinion. So if you didn't know about that forecast tool, I think it is very, very helpful. One of the other things that I was also concerned about was the fact that it seemed to me that there wasn't an awful lot of extra information going in and around the games that you play. So if you're in a tournament, I felt that certain things should be factored in. Is it rally scoring or traditional scoring? And are you playing in a round robin, or are you playing in a knockout round, or are you playing in a podium match? All these things to me seem to make sense, and it did, or should be captured and used to decide how your points are going to be calculated, your DUPR rating points are going to be calculated on that game. And some of that sensitivity didn't seem to be there. But it turns out that actually there's probably more of that happening than I realized. And again, Sarah explained it like this.
The first thing that I want to say is actually we do consider rally scoring. And there's actually a pretty big difference between our two formulas for the expected score for a traditional match and for a rally scoring match. I think that this is actually a good example to give some insight into like how we think through things and how we like study the algorithm. So in order to come up with these formulas, we look at past data. We look at all of our millions of matches and model that. And then we also go through and do these simulations where we see, for example, we could expect a match to be 11-5, for a 5 versus a 4-5, or we could predict 11-6. We can go through and we test those different simulations. And the way that we measure how we're doing is by predictive accuracy. So based on the scheme that we've chosen, how well can we predict future winners and future scores of matches? So we have done that, and we have different formulas for a rally scoring match versus a traditional scoring match. And it's actually pretty significant. So in order to see that, you can go into your app and like look at that forecast tool and just see if you have rally scoring toggled on and off, what the difference in that expected score would be. So in regards to actually collecting that metadata, so right now, if you were to submit a club match on our website, you would have that option to toggle. If you're submitting through an API partner or through one of the partners that we've integrated with, then that's a good question of if those are available. So to be honest, with a lot of data collection and this like overall idea of metadata, that obviously comes at like the collection level. And at DUPR, we've really prioritized trying to get data from as many directions as possible, because one thing that whenever we were like starting to form as a company, one thing that we really wanted to set us apart is this idea of collecting data from everywhere for a player rather than just like one sanctioned tournament or one like type of sanctioning. And so that's why we have club submit matches. That's why we have tournament submit matches. That's why we have partnerships with pickleballbrackets.com and with Swish and with Replay. And so what is important is that whenever we make these changes to collect that metadata, now we have to spread it to all of these partners, right? So kind of one of those like pros and cons of trying to accept data in as many directions as possible. But that being said, right, we can always make changes and try to accept more metadata. So in regards to things like, let's talk like round robin match versus a gold medal match, or even something like later in the double elimination. So, I'm a player. I've played tons of tournaments. I think that, obviously later on in the tournament, you're putting forth a different level of effort. And to me, that would be the reason that we would count it more, is like based on kind of like the effort being shown. Like, I really know this is when you're trying your best to, to perform. And so yeah, that's something that we could definitely experiment with. But what we then have to do is we have to make sure that we're collecting that data on a consistent basis, right? So whenever we get it from Replay, whenever we get it from pickleballtournaments.com, whenever somebody uploads it to the DUPR club, right? So that's where it kind of takes this like actually pretty big step to start to incorporate that data. But one thing that is also important to note with DUPR is we are kind of intentionally simple in the way that we like to have one rating. Obviously, you have a singles rating and you have a doubles rating. Those two sports are pretty different. There are some similarities between a person's singles and doubles for some people, but not for everyone. But for, one thing that we've heard a lot is even just like having different mixed ratings and gender ratings. And there's some good points for it. But at the end of the day, most people should compete at around the same level in both mixed doubles and gender doubles. Maybe somebody's like a 3-4 in one and a 3-6 in the other, which is different, right? Like that means you are maybe a little bit more talented at the other one, but you can still compete at the 3-5 level. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take all of your results, kind of like mold them into one and predict your typical day in lots of different settings, right? That we could say it's mixed doubles or gender doubles, or we could say it's a club or a tournament, or we could say it's a round robin or a medal match, right? Like there's all of these different scenarios that we can look at. And while we could incorporate them all differently into the algorithm, for now, we're just saying we want to get as much as possible on one player and put it into their rating, because we believe that the more data that we have, the more accurate rating that we're going to give to every player. And then next, what we're working on is, rather than actually incorporating these things into the rating, we're first working on just incorporating them as like analytical tools for the player. So even though, let's say you're a 3-5, maybe you are a 3-6 when you're playing mixed typically, and you're a 3-4 when you're playing gender doubles. While we don't necessarily want to give you two different ratings to sign up for, we can at least give you those insights. And so you can be aware and help, continue to work on making your game as complete as possible. In the same way, we can say, okay, here's how you're performing when you're playing club matches. Here's how you're performing when you're playing tournament matches. Here's how you're performing at round robin. Here's how you're performing at, later on in the medal stage. So that type of metadata, I think that's most likely our next approach, is more of like using it as like maybe kind of like subscores to your overall rating, to where your overall rating is still the same. That's still trying to be most predictive of your typical day, but then you can kind of see these other parts of your game and figure out how to become the most complete player.
Yeah, so it was encouraging to see that, first of all, Sarah acknowledges that there could be things that they could be collecting that they're currently not, that do impact the game. And she was very open to getting more feedback and adding things as they go on. As you mentioned right at the start, it's an evolving algorithm. So, but I was pleased that she was really open-minded on that. And also, though, she explained it can be kind of difficult, because the partners that collect the data for them, people like, Baseline or SportsSync or whoever it might be that send the data, they also have to update their applications if they ever want to capture new data, and they need to be able to get that from all of their partners. So I understand it's not actually that easy to just simply add more metadata about matches in order to make it increasingly more accurate, but she seems to have a desire to do that more, increasingly so. The other thing was, it was interesting that she mentioned that rally scoring and traditional scoring is captured by them, because I suspect, and based on later conversation I had with her, it could be the case that some of the Asia partners are not sending that information in because it looked to be missing in some of the games that they're recording. So as a result of this, we're actually going to take a look at that and work with the DUPR team to see if games are being sent to them from the Asia data providers with that rally versus traditional detail being attached to it, because it makes a big difference on the calculation of the DUPR score. So that's something we're going to look at and come back to later. I took it a little stage further though, because whilst I did understand what she was saying about how they're calculating, why a winner of a game or a winner of a whole tournament may not go up in their DUPR ratings, I wanted to give us some cast iron examples. So without mentioning any names, I gave her a real example of someone that I know here in Malaysia that is a very good player from another sport that has come into pickleball. And she has won a number of mixed doubles and women's doubles titles at intermediate level. But even though she's won, I think, 4 or 5 tournaments, over the course of those tournaments, her DUPR actually still went down. And I said to Sarah, surely that can't be right. There's someone that's winning these intermediate level tournaments, that their DUPR is actually going down over time. And so, again, she looked at why that might be. And again, her answer was at least logical. So have a listen to what Sarah thought about that.
It's this weird thing of, up until a few months ago, whenever you played a match and you won the match, your rating went up. And when you lost the match, your rating went down. And so it kind of like went to your DUPR moved with the emotion that you were already feeling from the match, right? No matter, there's different wins, right? I know we all say a win's a win, and that's true within a tournament, right? I think it's important to separate what you're working towards within the tournament and what you're working towards with your DUPR. So whenever you're playing a tournament, your goal is to win. And so anyone who wins a tournament should be excited about winning the tournament, right? Because that was the goal that you set out whenever you went to play that tournament. With DUPR, we are not trying to reward or penalize. And I think that people think that we are. But what we are trying to do is we are just trying to rate players, right? We are trying to measure in as accurate of a way as possible. And so if you go up every time you win and you go down every time you lose, that is really more of a reward or a penalty. However, if you have the opportunity to have a close loss and improve your rating because you proved that you were closer than what we expected, or if you win, but you don't win as dominantly as what we expected, then you're going to go down. We are just learning more about you as a player. And like I was explaining earlier, right? Think about this example. You have, I always actually try to use singles just as an example because it's a little bit easier, and then doubles, you can just take the average. But, say that you have a 5-0 player and a 4-5 player. And the 5-0 player is expected to win, we'll say something around 11-5. If they win 11-9, okay, so they win, it doesn't make sense for us to push their ratings further apart, right? That would mean the winner going up and the loser going down. Because in the future, what we would do there is that we would now predict the game to be even further apart, maybe now like 11-4, right? However, they just proved that they were closer in rating than what we expected. Therefore, what we do is we push them closer together, and maybe next time we predict something like 11-6. And so that's the way that we're thinking through this. We are trying to think about predicting the next time they play as accurately as possible. We're not trying to think about rewarding their match based on whether they won or lost. So going back to your example of winning a whole tournament and going down, right? Because what I've been describing is kind of more on like the match level. If you have gone and won a whole tournament, like let's say even you go 5-0, I think a lot of times like you can still win a tournament and not win every match, right? Like what you were describing earlier is there's a round robin, and then there's the medal rounds. And what that can mean is that you can perform at the right times. Maybe you do start slower, or maybe you're not exerting too much energy on purpose during the round robin and you're saving it until later, whatever that is, right? Like maybe you perform later when it matters more, right? But with that, the only way that you could say go 5-0, 5-0, or 5-1 or something over a tournament and go down, the only way is if you are significantly higher rated than everyone else, okay? So what we're doing, right, is we're saying, okay, here's what we expect to happen. And then the team that overperforms is going to go up, the team that underperforms is going to go down. And so if you are winning every match and your rating is consistently going down, that means that every single match you are the favorite. And in all of those matches, you are not winning as dominantly as you are expected to win. And so that's literally the only way that can occur. And so what that means is that even though that she's in the right division with her DUPR rating, maybe the other people are actually lower, right? Maybe they were 2.9s or 2.8s that entered this division, and now she's being expected to beat them, 11-3 or something like that. And so that's where it also comes into play of like, it's very important that directors help players by making everyone sign up at their DUPR level. And not only do we want people to enforce like an upper cap, but we also want a lower cap, right? So for this player that you're describing, if she knows that she's going to go into a bracket where there's only players between 3-0 and 3-5, for example, then she's never going to have to win more dominantly than like 11-5, right? So that's another thing to consider too, is that directors like really can help players by making sure that they're enforcing these divisions that are capped by DUPR.
I think the biggest takeaway I took from Sarah's answer about that example I gave is where she says something to the effect of, DUPR are not trying to reward or penalize players with the rating system. So even though she was acknowledged how it's great to win a tournament, she's saying the point of the DUPR system is not to reward that or penalize that. It's purely to look at your results and rate your level as a player. And I think, certainly even myself, I'm guilty of not seeing it that way, because I'm just thinking about, if I win, I want my DUPR to go up, I want to have a better rating. But actually the rating is about really letting you know where you are against other players. So again, I understand what she's saying there. Now, of course, dependent on the extensive nature of the data that they have, there could still be anomalies in whether they get that exactly right. But in terms of what they're trying to achieve, that did make sense to me. I moved it on a little bit after that because I'd also read something we'd covered on Pickleball News Asia was about these DUPR verified tournaments where tournament directors and tournament organizers can go to DUPR and become a DUPR verified tournament. But one of the things that worried me about that was they seem to state that to be DUPR verified, you had to set very tight swim lanes. So like if I'm a 3.5 player, I can't play up to in a 4.0 category or something like that. Now I'm used to the idea of better players not being able to play down, but stopping players playing up seemed to be counterproductive to me because we all want the chance to play better players. So I wanted to get an idea of, one, if I understood that correctly, and secondly, what their logic was in trying to push people into these swim lanes, as I call them, because I wondered whether it was about the algorithm that they've got dictating who we can play and stopping us from being able to play up against better players, which I didn't think was fair. So here's what Sarah told me when I asked her that.
Well, whenever we updated the algorithm to have this notion of overperformance and underperformance rather than like winning and losing and that dictating whether you go up or down, I think what we want to be as DUPR is we want to be that like measurement. We want to just analyze people. We don't want to necessarily dictate what people are doing, right? We want people to go and sign up at the level that they feel like they can compete at, and then we will measure them accordingly, right? However, that's not how it always works. I think, as people can get a little bit obsessed with their DUPR rating and they want it to be as high as possible or as low as possible, depending on what their goals are, right? Some people might try to keep it low to go and win a tournament that they know that they can win, right? So what we want to do is we don't actually want to use our algorithm to make people make decisions on what they want to play, if that makes sense. We just want to measure. So the algorithm can absolutely handle any type of match. It can handle whether there's a difference of 0.5, 0.7, 1, whatever that might be. It's more about the experience of the player that we're looking for. So whenever we say that we don't necessarily want people to play up or down, right? It's very obvious why you wouldn't want people to play down, right? That's the notion of sandbagging. That's never fun for that lower rated player that when a director lets someone in that knows that they can just beat up on everyone. But even on the other hand, if somebody is just trying to play up, maybe to try to win a few points and increase their DUPR, we don't necessarily want that either, right? Like if somebody is just playing up all the time and losing like 11-3, 11-4, or 11-2, whatever, right? Like they're not necessarily proving that they're at that higher level. And it's honestly not a good experience for that higher level player either, to be playing these matches where they are having to like, try to win 11-2 or 11-3, right? Like just like think about that from the higher level players' perspective of having these lower level players, where they're constantly like trying to like beat them. Like that's not fun, right? To try to beat people like 11-2, you kind of feel bad about yourself. And it's just like a lot of pressure, right? So what we are truly trying to do is give everyone the opportunity. Like whenever you step out on the court, the best experience occurs when you are trying to win against a team that is similarly skilled to you, right? So that's what we are trying to create. So if you really can go out and compete, in my opinion, you should only be signing up for a tournament if you think you can win games at least. You don't necessarily need to feel like you can win the whole tournament, right? The sport is split up typically into these like 0.5 levels, 3-5, 4-0. There's going to be times in your progression where you think you can win the tournament. Like right now, I feel like a very strong 4-0. Whereas before, I know I was a 4-0 because I could compete, I could hang with these people, but I didn't necessarily expect myself to win. But we don't want somebody who's truly a 3-5 to play at that 4-0 expecting that they are going to lose every game, if that makes sense, right? So we want everyone to go out knowing that they have an opportunity to compete. And so the DUPR rating really works kind of like a ladder, right? It's just like a numerical ladder that people work through. And so if you are performing well against other people at your same DUPR rating, your rating is going to go up, right? Going back to the example that we talked about with the badminton lady, the reason that she's not going up is because the people she's beating have probably pretty significantly lower DUPRs than her. And so that's why it's important. If you're playing at your DUPR level and you are winning, then you are going up. And if you're playing slightly above your level, we're not saying that you can't play up at all, right? We don't want you to go up and play a full point. We don't want 3-5s playing in a 4-5 division. Even if occasionally you can maybe get 5 points off of a 4-5, that's not a good experience to like try to get 5 points in one game in a whole tournament, right? It's not a good experience for anyone. But a 3-5 who's like a stronger 3-5 playing in a 4-0 tournament, that's totally fine, right? Like, so I think, like you said, having the opportunity to challenge yourself and keep growing, absolutely, right? So I think playing within that like 0.5 range is great. Playing a full point up, I don't see as beneficial for anyone.
Okay, so I do think that, again, Sarah probably does have a point there. I think, when she talks about player experience, both, higher and lower ranked players, I think what she's saying is not without foundation. In fact, I've even had conversations with high ranked players that say that when very low ranked players end up playing in their division, it's not fun for them or the lower ranked player, and they don't enjoy getting the easy victory. So I can see what she's saying there, but I suspect though that when she talks about maybe it being okay to play up half a point, so 0.5, I think I don't really disagree with her, but in Asia, I think that potentially we just don't have the number of players yet where squeezing it that tight makes sense. And maybe in Asia, it would still make sense for people to play up a whole point. But again, in terms of the pure science of the numbers, I have to defer to her, but it may be something that we or others could put to DUPR in terms of DUPR verified tournaments going forward, and maybe something we speak to tournament directors about here to discuss with DUPR going into the future. The very final thing that I wanted to ask Sarah about was actually about a big issue that we have, and particularly in Asia. I believe it's worse in Asia than in the US, and that is let's call it DUPR cheats. So that's people that are either intentionally keeping their DUPRs low so that they can play in money competitions at a lower level, or they are even creating multiple accounts, fake accounts, so that they can play high level but use another lower ranked account to go and play lower ranked tournaments. And at the moment, it doesn't seem like DUPR are doing much in terms of working out your identity to stop this happening. So I wondered, one, was she aware of it? And secondly, what are they planning to do to see what they can do to curb down on these, let's call it DUPR cheats? And again, it was something that she's very well aware of. Here's what she told me.
Yeah, so you mentioned that the problem might be a little bit worse over in Asia and than it is in the States. And there's definitely a decent chance of that, right? I think as just with all of pickleball, right? It's been growing in the United States for many years, and then in the past couple of years really picked up in Asia. And so I think DUPR is probably a little bit more ahead on pickleball within the States, and we are working really, really hard to keep pace now with the growth in Asia. And actually, this is a cool opportunity for me to kind of highlight DUPR in Asia. It's growing super fast. And actually now Malaysia is our leading international user base, which is really cool. Malaysia, Philippines, India, and what's the last one? Vietnam. So the four of those are kind of leading the way DUPR wise, which, I'd be curious from you on if you feel that's kind of the same groups that are leading pickleball generally in Asia. But so with that really quick growth there, right? We're doing our best to keep up, and we do have people in Asia who work for DUPR full time, and then we obviously have tournament directors who we have close partnerships with. And so what's important as we're growing in these different places is to have a physical presence, right? Because like you said, if a director does not know the person, then it's so much harder for them to actually vet if they do have another account or not, right? And I think whenever you're smaller scale, then you can actually kind of lean on that personal knowledge. However, as things keep growing, we have to keep putting things in place that are a little bit more automatic. And so, and what we've done in the past, and we have a fair play committee that's dedicated to looking through accounts and trying to identify people that have two accounts. But as you know, right, people can choose the name that they want to put on the account or whatever that might be. And so the next step that we're doing is we're going to put in phone number verification. And you have to put in a phone number, you have to verify it, and only one account can go with every phone number. And we're gonna, not allow things like Google phone and stuff like that, where you can come up with these fake numbers, right? So that's our next step is this phone number verification, where we're able to tie one account to every phone number. And then, we're looking at exploring other things like identity verification and, how we can how a director can check IDs and potentially verify an account. So we're definitely looking into all these things because we do believe that it's very, very important for the overall ecosystem that every player has exactly one account, right? And we understand that for the players who are honest and only have one account, that it is very frustrating to them whenever there are people who are cheating the system. And so we are working very hard to try to, to try to regulate and enforce these rules for everyone. But in the meantime, while we're working on these things, we do hear from people if club director knows of somebody that has two accounts, we absolutely want them to reach out. And, what we're always going to do is we're going to combine those counts into one. And same for players, if you know of somebody, you can be a tattletale, you can reach out to our support team and say, hey, I know of this person that has multiple accounts. Can you please look into this player? And so, yeah, but I would say with everything, obviously, we're always working on trying to improve. My main job is trying to improve the algorithm. But definitely a main job of some other people at DUPR and us as a team is working on just trying to have our data be as clean, which allows for the game to be as fair as possible for every player.
So I think I agree again with Sarah that ultimately, if people really try and cheat the system, they're gonna find a way to do it. But just by implementing things like she mentioned about tying your account to a phone number, which doesn't happen right now, of course, it's kind of easy for people that really want to cheat to find a way around that. But it does put a hurdle in the way that will stop a lot of people from just doing it because it's easy to do. And I think that that's the key here. The more they do to just make it a little bit more difficult to fake accounts and do multiple accounts, the less people will do it. And then it becomes easier to police those people that are really trying to buck the system. So good that they are doing things, obviously a lot more to do. And the same message again, whether it's via us or just contacting DUPR, they are always interested in any feedback you want to give them, particularly about things like how they can help to spot fake accounts. So don't be afraid to get in touch with them as well. But with that, that brought me to the end of my conversation with Sarah. Certainly from my perspective, the rating system is not perfect, but it will take many years of collecting data to get it better and better. It is really the only one we have, and I can see definitely the logic in their change of algorithm. Overall, I feel that Sarah did a really good job of explaining why they made those changes. I certainly understand it a lot better. And I think by kind of collaborating with them, continuing to give them feedback, it should continue to get better. Hopefully, for anyone else out there that was confused like me, this has been helpful. Hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. And as mentioned before, if you liked it, please do like and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe to our channel. And if you want to keep up to date on anything pickleball related, do check us out on pickleballnewsasia.com.